So Brian, it is fantastic to see you again. You are of course one of our authors anyway, author of the very successful book The Best of Times. So when exactly did colour come to town for ITV then?
Colour came to ITV as it did to BBC One on Saturday the 15th of November on the stroke of midnight. But not to everyone and not all at once. Colour didn't reach ITV in Scotland until the following month. It didn't get to Wales until the following year in April, to Northern Ireland in September 1970, to other parts of the UK in other months during 70 and 71. And poor old Channel Islands didn't get colour until July 1976.
I'm puzzled by that. Why was there such a slow rollout then, really?
All kinds of reasons. ITV's technical standard, like the BBC's, was upgraded from 4 or 5 line VHF, very high frequency, to 625 line UHF, ultra high frequency. Both ITV and BBC had been busy experimenting with colour since the 50s, so had other countries around the world, particularly America. By 1965, all primetime programmes on American television were being transmitted in colour, and Lou Grade at ATV in London started to make programmes in colour to sell to them, obliging him to concede a very expensive deal with the ACTT, which gave the rest of us a lot of problems when the Postmaster General licensed colour for BBC Two in 1967 and ITV and BBC One in 1969. And then in the middle of all this extraordinary activity, the Independent Television Authority awarded its new ITV franchises, and the crazy quilt of a network of 14 programme companies, which it had laid down in 1955 when ITV began, with different programme companies providing programmes at weekdays and weekends in the North, the Midlands and London, was given the most enormous shake. Several companies, big and small, lost their franchises. Others had their regions or their franchises, or both, revised. The North was split in two, with a different programme company on either side of the Pennines, and all the franchises were awarded for all 7 days of the week, with the exception of London, which remained split between weekdays and weekends. As a result, the studios, the transmitters, the relay stations, and the equipment of all the successful old companies had to be changed to 625 line colour, and new studios and new transmitters and new equipment had to be organised, purchased for the successful new ones, all of which cost a great deal of money and took a lot of time. That's the reason for the slow rollout.
So what was the American system, NTSC, adopted by the BBC and ITV then, Brian?
No, not for a minute. I'd been in America in 1957 and 58 and seen the American system, NTSC, in action. It was known there, NTSC was known there as never twice the same colour. We, British television, decided to adopt a system developed by a German engineer, PAL, P-A-L, which we were very happy to accept as perfection at last.
Yeah, I think though in essence though, all those years of, experimentation in colour did pay off in the end though, didn't they?
Oh, it did indeed. John Henshaw will be talking later about the BBC's experiments in colour. And I've got with me Wynne who was the head girl of a television toppers dance troupe, who took part in those BBC colour experiments at Alexandra Palace in the 50s, in 1956 to be sure. So if you want to ask her about it, here's Wynne.
Wynne, it is fantastic that you can join us this afternoon. I understand you were the head girl of the television toppers, is that right?
Yes, I joined Leslie Roberts in 1950, the toppers. And in 1953, I became head girl of the 12 toppers.
And the toppers took part in those early colour experiments, did they, for the BBC, in what, about 1955? 57.
It was then the Leslie Roberts silhouettes, because Dickie Afton, who was a producer at the BBC, wanted to take the troupe to Blackpool for the summer season. And there are 6 of us, we didn't want to go. We had boyfriends, husbands, and whatever. So Leslie and we took auditions, and we had another 6 girls join us. And we became the Leslie Roberts silhouettes. Silhouettes because we worked for Brian, and we did... What did we do, Brian?
Music and magic.
We did music and magic, yes. And it was great. So we were the silhouettes.
Well, how different was it for you to be dancing in colour for the first time?
Not different at all. We wore the same type of costumes, the same headdresses, same shoes. The only thing that was different, Alexandra was a very large building, but only a small studio. So we had to have a recording of something, a record to dance to, rather than the Eric Robinson BBC Dance Orchestra. And Leslie was going on holiday at that time, and he said to me, before I get back, you find a record to dance to. And I found and heard a number of recordings, and I found Benny Goodman's Don't Be That Way. So we danced to that. Gotcha. It was lovely.
Now here's the thing though, were you able to see the result, because most people only had black and white televisions?
Yes, we were allowed to go into the control room 2 at a time.
And what did you think of it?
It was fascinating. We couldn't believe it. And I said to whoever, when are we going to see it? In a year's time on our screens? And he said, no, 10 years, maybe.
And he was exactly right, wasn't he? Because BBC Two started its colour transmissions in 1967.
That's true.
And were you still dancing in 67?
No. I was by then married, 3 babies, and we were all sitting watching colour television together on our screens.
That's good.
It was just wonderful.
That's great, Wynne. Thank you very much for joining us. That's really kind of you. Mrs. Wynne Rooms, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks, Wynne. And after our conversation, Chris, your audience is going to see a real scoop. Howard Steele's talk about ITV's colour experiments, which was transmitted to all ITV staff on closed circuit on the first morning of ITV's colour transmissions. Howard was the chief engineer, the brilliant chief engineer, who transformed Warner Brothers' old film studio in Teddington into a state-of-the-art television studio for ABC television. ABC gave him a budget of £100,000, the equivalent of very nearly £2.5 million today, to experiment with colour and PAL. And in due course, Howard was able to show press demos of 405 line television in PAL of the most remarkable quality. Unfortunately, it was so good that the Independent Television Authority lured him away from us. By then I was director of programs for ABC Television. Lured him away from us to be their own chief engineer and director of engineering. But Howard was generous enough to say, when ITV's colour achievements were being praised, that none of this would have been possible without that original nucleus at ABC.
But what did you do yourself as far as colour was concerned?
My one regret in 42 years of working in television was that I never got to produce programmes in colour. I was just responsible for them. At first, for Thames Television, London's weekday programme provider, when ABC Television was made the senior partner in its amalgamation with Associated Rediffusion. And as a weekday company, of course, we were never going to be the first to transmit colour for ITV. Granada wanted to and planned to, but they were prevented by a union dispute, and LWT, London Weekend, didn't start its colour transmissions until the following day, till Sunday. So BBC One beat all of us in ATB to the punch with their Petula Clark concert from the Royal Albert Hall on that stroke of midnight on that fateful Saturday.
But of course you had been preparing colour productions.
Yeah, and I should have gone straight on to that.
It's okay.
Is that all right? Okay.
Yeah. Keep going.
But I'd managed to put together a program team at Thames, second to none, and we've been busy preparing our colour productions for over a year. And by spring of 1970, we had more programmes in London's weekday top 10 than the BBC, and as many as all the other ITV companies put together, in spite of Coronation Street, and all of those were in colour. And one of those was This Is Your Life, and immediately after this conversation you scheduled an early colour edition of This Is Your Life, introduced by another old mate of mine, Steve Minchin, and your audience might be interested to know a bit of the programme's backstory. When Eamon Andrews joined our little weekend programme supplier to the North and Midlands, in 1964, the BBC allowed its rights to This Is Your Life to simply disappear. Eamon continued his success at the weekend for ABC with World of Sport on Saturday and British Television's first late-night chat show, live from London on Sunday. But 4 years later, at Thames, World of Sport was London Weekend's responsibility, and Eamon was in charge of our weekday daily programme of news and current affairs for London. We were looking for a new venture for him to handle, and one day he walked into my office put a sheet of paper down on my desk and wrote 4 words on it. This is your life. And inserted a 5th word in front of life, which was colourful. And he looked at me and said, "Don't you think this is your life would look great in colour?" And yes, of course it would. And it did. And Eamon continued to introduce it, giving with colour, giving This Is Your Life a new look and a new life for the next 18 years until he died. So tell him about it, Steve, and the best of luck.